In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
On Maundy Thursday, you'll remember we emptied the offering, put out the sanctuary lights, and contemplated a world of meaninglessness, a world without hope, a world without God. Yesterday, at the great vigil of Easter, the most significant service of the year, we rekindled the flame, the symbol of God's presence among us, brought it into its home among the people who formed the church, sang of its profound meaning through history, shared its light with all, and from it we relit the sanctuary candle and proclaimed resurrection. It's a form of ritual act as ancient as society itself. Throughout history, cultures have found ways of representing the meaning of death and rebirth, of the constant change of existence, as we do here. Our death and rebirth story is, of course, a very personal one. It is the crucifixion and resurrection of the Lord. And through it, we remind ourselves that no matter how dark the world may seem at times, the light will return. Though it sometimes feels otherwise, God never abandons us. For us, the resurrection means that in our last moments of life, if not before, when the things we have built, the belongings we have gathered, the fame we have garnered, become meaningless to us because they cannot help us at that point, we know that we are not meaningless. All things come to an end except God's love for us. We continue as the beloved children of God, and despite all the things that we will lose along the way, whatever love that we have shared persists. Einstein said that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. The same thing can be said about love. It can neither be created nor destroyed, because love is God. When we share love, we share God. So for us, the resurrection means that all those who try to impose their meaning on us will ultimately fail. Now, I suspect you probably never thought of the world in terms of imposing meaning and narrative that I've been trying to introduce since I came here in January. The importance I keep telling you of how we tell the story. How the story is told determines everything. So, for example, when people try to control us, to use us, to get the better of us, they're trying to tell a story about us as they want it to be told. And that's exactly what people did to Christ. In fact, killing someone is the ultimate attempt to impose one's meaning on them, to silence them, so that one can write their story without resistance. The religious authorities told the story that he was a threat to the state and iniquitous. But the resurrection prevented them from succeeding. In brief, the resurrection means that God is the ultimate storyteller. No matter what others might do, no matter how they might try to tell the story, we will always have a part in God's story. And God's story is about love. Those who understand this do not try to write others out of the story. They do not do evil. To the extent, however, that we do not understand love, we see relationships as a game with winners and losers. And those who have a near inability to love, I have a fascination with sociopaths. Those who have a near inability to love, sociopaths, are on that extreme end of that spectrum. Being incapable of empathy, the empathy that underlies love, the empathy that allows me to identify with you, say, I see you, I see your weaknesses, I know my own weaknesses, I identify with that. I love you in your weaknesses because I know that I share weaknesses. That empathy underlies love. Being incapable of that, they generally do not even believe that love is real. They think that people speak of love merely as one more way of manipulation. For sociopaths, everything is a ploy to see who can tell the story, who can succeed and imposing his will. And they're usually men, not always. On the other side of the spectrum are those who are remarkably empathetic, who know love, who know God. Now, whether they call it God or not does not really matter, because God is the one telling the story. Now, I've had visitors on Easter hear me say things like that and tell me afterwards, "That's exactly what I think, Reverend. We don't need church as long as we love." Not what I said. They turn what I've said into an excuse not to practice love in any meaningful way in an actual community of human beings that who face each other throughout the week. And it's hard, isn't it? I mean, things arise. We have to work through them. It makes us grow. Love is not some thought experiment. We might tell a story about love, but unless we are participating in God's story, we're just talking. However we may fare among all these games that might be played by the misguided, we are adored by God. Though we find cynicism throughout the world, ultimately it does not win, and we do not have to share others' jaundiced view. We can celebrate the loving purpose of the universe and our role in it. We can live without fear, knowing that ultimately things are working out according to plan as we return to the loving God who created us. And having loved his own who were in the world, he loved us to the end. Yesterday we read the narrative of creation, though we didn't get all the way to the temptation. We who know that God tells the story also know that that tale of Adam and Eve is not about a God who created a world with a cynical spiritual trap placed in its midst, meant to test our will, a test that we failed and resulted in a curse upon the rest of humanity. This is how those who worship power would see the story, as that of a God who plays games with God's own creation, creating them flawed, and then punishing them for their flaw. A kind of gotcha God. We know that the story indicates not some past failure that dooms humanity, but something that each of us faces every minute in every interaction. It is the story of a loving God who allows us the option of turning away in order that we might also have the option of turning towards, of choosing love. This is the choice between division or reconciliation, between power and love, between putting down and building up that we always face. We are Adam and Eve. And each minute we face that tree of knowledge of good and evil. And we can pluck its fruit and attempt to make ourselves like God, make ourselves the storytellers, or we can refrain with our knowledge and devote ourselves to love and relationship. By eating that fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, Adam and Eve gain the knowledge that they can tell their own story, that they can act not only with God and in God's story, but they can act against God. So now they understand good and evil. Ultimately, the desire to be like God, to dominate and be powerful and to control our own story, turns us away from God. And the tree of knowledge is in the center of the garden because our central decision in life is always to serve God or to serve self. To let God tell the story, to tell it ourselves. We necessarily partake of that truth, of good and evil. But what we do after that, that's our free will. Knowledge allows us to turn towards God and to life, but it also allows us to turn away from God and away from life, to spread hurt and division. This is the extent of our freedom. So when we use our knowledge of good and evil to turn farther from God and from one another, we separate ourselves from God, and that makes us self-aware. We become aware of ourselves as individuals. Adam and Eve become aware of their nakedness. They clothe their bodies, and they begin the odyssey of life. Our awareness of our own vulnerability may cause us to desire even more power, to rely even more upon ourselves. And in so doing, we are forced to toil As the text says, for when you eat from it, you will surely die. The result of knowing good from evil, as we all do, of telling our own story, the ability to tell our own story, creates discord as power and aggression enter the story. The text says, I will put hostility between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. Her offspring will attack your head, and you will attack her offspring's heel. And one that is less popular these days. You will want to control your husband, but he will dominate you. It was written a long time ago. God created us with the ability to turn away from God, not as a cynical test, but because otherwise our turning towards God would be meaningless. There's no love in compulsion. God is always inviting us into that story of resurrection. No matter what happens, no matter what story others may tell, we know we have a part in God's story of love.